According to Transparency International, a respected international organization, Bosnia is the most corrupt country in the region. Corruption is the backbone of its politics. In a hotel in Banja Luka, the capital of Republika Srpska, I met Svetlana Senic, a former finance minister there and one of the few people willing to speak out on the issue.
I would say that corruption is a bigger problem than national issues or ethnic groups, because national rhetorics is actually a cover for huge corruption.
And where exactly does corruption connect with party politics?
It's deep in party politics. Recently, for example, there was a letter which was signed by ruling party here, SNSD, asking their managers in public institutions or party to see, how loyal they were to the party, and also how many of people did they employ in those public institutions, because that is considered to be a loyal member of the party. And starting from there up to millions and millions which they spent uncontrolled in a way, with no legal system, there is nothing you can expect.
So not just in Republika Srpska and elsewhere, the nationalist rhetoric connects with corruption.
Connects, of course, with the corruption, because it's a cover for the corruption. That's the way how to hide the massive corruption. We are here to defend your national interest, and we are here to defend you and your rights. And because of that, of course, you have to turn blind eye to the fact that we are getting richer and you are getting poorer, of course.
As she talks, Svetlana inhales on a chain of long brown cigarettes. She has the air of a woman who has reached the end of her tether. She sees no way out for Bosnia. I'm in the main pedestrian street of Banja Luka, the capital of the Bosnian Serbs. Unlike Sarajevo, it's a city untouched by the war. The population is still predominantly Serb. Within the government buildings, some old, some new, being built at enormous European expense, there's great dissatisfaction with things as they stand. There's talk of secession, a declaration of a separate republic, going it alone. Is there any support for this among the people in the street? What would you think of an independent Republika Srpska?
Well, it's not such a great idea currently because the politics sucks, but that's a tricky question.
Do you think it appeals to some people?
Yes, because we suffer from a disease called Big Serbs. Heavenly people. They can do everything, but they don't want to do it, nothing.
So what do you think of your politicians?
Crooked, I would say. If you have the money, you have the politicians. So it's not ideal, it's not good, it's not everything.
Do you want to stay in one Bosnia?
Well, yeah, I don't have any problem with other nations or religions or nothing. So as long as there is no war, no stupidity, okay.
So what are your hopes for Republika Srpska?
Well, I hope that some smart new people will come to do better. But with this politics, I don't know. Maybe my generation, which now are students, maybe they will change anything. But these people that are currently on top, I don't believe.
All the people of Bosnia, of whichever group, want change, and they need it. Many have had enough of the nationalist rhetoric of politicians from Tito's time who continue to hold power. And they've had enough of the cult of personality embodied by Tito, then continuing with Milosevic in Serbia, Tudjman in Croatia, and now Milorad Dodik in Republika Srpska, and Haris Silajdžić, the Bosnian president. To many, Bosnia seems to be in regression. In a room with a view of the mountains from which Sarajevo was shelled, I met Srećko Latal, who was a reporter for Associated Press during the war and is now an analyst for the International Crisis Group. Are we returning to the politics of identity or ethnicity, where people just see themselves as members of this group or that, rather than as Bosnians?
We have been there for the past several years, and not only because of ethnic intolerance that occurred during and after the war, but also because of the lack of political alternative. Because after all these years, all local parties became so similar. I mean, they all went through certain reforms, and We simply lack a clear political alternative. We lack differences in ideologies that would help people to choose their representatives and to choose their leaders. As long as we lack alternative politicians, many people will continue voting for national parties, because in this country, national identity or ethnic or religious identity has in some ways replaced political identity.
The present deadlock has opened the door once more to strident nationalism. Milorad Dodik, the Bosnian Serb leader, has talked of independence for Republika Srpska, splitting it from the rest of Bosnia. Haris Silajic has proposed rolling back the Dayton Agreement and creating a centralized state. This has halted any progress on the urgent need for a new and agreed constitution. The political leaders are playing dangerous games. Svetlana Senic.
Over the past few months, since we are approaching elections of October 2010, they will use every single possibility or weapon or nationalism in order to stay in power and to hide the fact that there is no money, corruption getting higher, huge budget deficit.
The language of nationalism, separate states for separate peoples, is a political safe haven for Muslims, Croats and Serbs. None will break out of it unless they all do. Mladen Ivanic is a moderate nationalist, president of the Party of Democratic Progress in Republika Srpska. And the election in October will be fought on issues of the economy or of nationalism?
Nationalism is some sort of the precondition, so you have to achieve some level of the nationalism in order to compete.
So what do you sense is the mood of the voters?
They're still scared. They still believe that in this country everything is possible, that nothing is so stable that they can be completely relaxed. They still believe that there is some sort of the threat from the other side or from the international community, that a lot of things happen in this part of the world, in the Balkans. Within the mind of the people, everything is possible. And as long as everything is possible, they cannot deal with the economy. They cannot deal with that.
Do you take seriously Dodik's threats for a referendum and an independent Republika Srpska?
He said so many times that he is not ready to make a referendum on independence. I think he promised that a few years ago. Then he tried to create another issue for these elections, speaking generally about the elections. Any other referendum except a referendum independence is not acceptable, basically. And Dodik is not ready to ask for that referendum.
Talk of a referendum here is freighted with bad memories. The Bosnian War began with a referendum on independence which was boycotted by the Serbs. Politicians play the nationalist card to whip up support, encouraged by a partisan press which in some cases they own. The old Bosnia, in which Muslims, Croats and Serbs lived and let live, has been replaced by a bleaker landscape of separated peoples, encouraged to think the worst of each other. Stepan Mesic, who until last February was president of Croatia, is very clear about what would happen if Republika Srpska tried to break away from the rest of the country.
That, of course, would be very dangerous, because almost at the same time, the Croats, which are mostly situated in Herzegovina, they would also seek to become part of Croatia. And that would leave us with a small Muslim state. And it would be surrounded by enemies. And all those unhappy with the breakup of Bosnia and Herzegovina would find refuge in that small Muslim state. And that small Muslim state could only survive with the assistance of Muslim fundamentalist regimes. And that would become, so to say, a new Palestine for the next 50 or 70 years. And this is why Bosnia and Herzegovina must survive in its entirety. And I have said, in case that someone would try to separate part of Bosnia and Herzegovina from the rest of the country, I would cut through a corridor which is 30 kilometers wide, and basically that would be a preventive measure that would allow Bosnia and Herzegovina to remain its entire area.
We asked the Bosnian president, Haris Silajic, for his comments on Mr. Mesic's bleak prediction, but the president declined to give us a statement.